In this episode of Ancient X-Files, bodies from the bog. Victims, it appears, of bizarre and violent deaths, which took place over 2,000 years ago. The ancient corpses provide a series of startling clues. They were no ordinary men. These were no ordinary killings. But first, the world's oldest temple. 3 times as old as the Egyptian pyramids. Evidence of the earliest religion ever discovered. But ancient images and carvings could show this religion was a death cult.
I'm sitting in what you might describe as a village of the dead.
Professor Graham Phillip, an archaeologist from Durham University, is in the ancient town of San Lufa. He's here to investigate what may be the most important archaeological find of a generation. In 1994, an old Turkish farmer ran his plough into a buried oblong stone. It turned out to be the flat top of the first from a set of awesome T-shaped megaliths. Untouched for thousands of years, uncovering these giant stones revealed that they were covered in the symbolic artwork of an unknown civilization. But the biggest surprise came when the site was carbon dated. Göbekli Tepe was more than 11,000 years old. 7,000 years older than the pyramids. 6,000 years older than Stonehenge. Somehow, deep in the Stone Age, civilization starts to appear out of nowhere. And a temple was built with intricate carvings, displaying organizational skills and engineering know-how thousands of years ahead of its time.
So we've got Stonehenge, massive monument, huge stone structures, and yet Göbekli Tepe is at least 6,000 years older than Stonehenge. It makes the technical achievement all the more impressive.
The discovery of Göbekli Tepe has radically challenged our concept of Stone Age man, thought by many to be simple hunter-gatherers.
This is more like a traditional impression of a hunter-gatherer. Limited resources, small bands, following animal herds around. It's highly unlikely that a community like this would have been able to build a monument like Göbekli. So the assumption must be that these societies were very different from our usual understanding of the nature of what hunter-gatherer communities were like.
Professor Phillip heads for the site. It's his first glimpse of the ancient megaliths.
Wow, this is amazing. What a fantastic sight. There seem to be 2 great big pillars in the middle. They're T-shaped. They're surrounded by a circle of smaller pillars, and there are rubble walls filling the spaces between them. Oh, it's huge. It must be 20 feet high. Massive structure.
These vast stone blocks were somehow quarried and intricately carved with nothing more than stone tools.
You can feel very clearly the edges that they followed when carving it out, and sense the level of detail and effort that's gone into bringing things out in relief.
The carvings on these ancient stones are a major clue that might unravel the mystery of who created this temple complex. Professor Philip heads to the old quarter of San Lufa, where he finds the headquarters of a team of German and Turkish archaeologists who are currently excavating the site. The team leader is Professor Klaus Schmidt.
Yeah, here I have a map for you.
Right.
You can recognize where you have been. We have 4 monumental enclosures here, numbered in order of their discovery. Enclosure A, B, C, and D, the large one. And yeah, in red are the T-shapes. Here in this mapping of
Using ground-penetrating radar, they found at least 16 additional enclosures that have not been excavated.
So the 4 enclosures I've seen are just in this small area?
Just in this small area,
Okay.
yeah.
There are literally hundreds of megaliths still buried. So far, Professor Schmidt and his team have only scratched the surface of this massive complex. Although only a small part of the site has been uncovered, they are already finding the most extraordinary images etched into the stones, including what seem like chimeras, half human and half animal.
Yeah, here on this pillar we again have a very rich decoration. Most dominating are 2 large birds depicted here, most probably cranes. But very interesting, the legs of the birds are not birds' legs, they are human legs.
Yes, they bend at the knee like human bone.
So it's maybe a depiction of a shaman transforming himself into a bird, into a crane.
Schmidt and his colleagues have come to the conclusion that the T-shaped megaliths are meant to be figures of some kind.
So this whole pillar here is a statue of some kind,
Yes, it's a statue. We use the word pillar, but it's just a word. In fact, these are statues. The upper part of the T is a human head seen in profile. So, and the pillar shaft is a human's body.
So you can see the 2 hands joining here from the 2 halves of the statue. And it's an animal skin or something?
Yes, with a belt buckle depicted here in the frontal part, and the shape of the tail shows us most probably it's the skin of a fox.
But worn as a loincloth.
Worn as a loincloth.
Is it possible that this figure might represent community leaders, elites, or do you think it's something different?
Every one of these statues that they are depicted without face.
Right.
And this phenomenon of being faceless shows us they are not part of our world, not part of our society. They come from somewhere else. They are maybe gods, the first gods depicted in mankind.
If these are representations of gods, as Schmidt believes, then this place could be the earliest temple ever known to mankind. The birth of religion, a place and time where hunter-gatherers stopped hunting in small packs, to come together at this temple site, to pray before these godlike figures. But what puzzles Professor Philip is how primitive Stone Age hunter-gatherers could have built such a sophisticated structure. Professor Schmidt wants to show Professor Philip something to help answer his question. On this hillside, Professor Schmidt has discovered a clue that might help explain this extraordinary feat of engineering.
Graham, did you recognize where we are? Look to this straight edge in the corner. It's a T-shape we are standing on.
Right, so it's one of the big stones?
Yes, one of these big stones still in the quarry situation. They abandoned it because after producing the shape, you can see exactly here that's a T-shape.
Yes.
Maybe some cracks had been visible and so they didn't extract it.
This is a huge monument, cut out with very basic tools.
Yes, they used flint tools. Flint is a very hard stone. It's a steel of the Stone Age. Limestone is, in comparison to flint, is quite soft. You just need a lot of time to pack and pack and pack, and you will get out this channel and you can produce this pillar.
So, I mean, how many people do you think it might require to excavate and transport just one of these?
We suppose 100 are not enough, but
Yes.
maybe 1,000 are too much. So 500, most probably male and adult persons taking part here in these activities.
Yeah.
Organizing on this scale would need leaders, a possible priestly class controlling the workforce. But where did these priests appear from, with their knowledge of stonework and ability to control large groups of people? Alien skills to primitive hunter-gatherers.
It's not so easy to produce such a block, such a single stone, and it's not easy to just to transport it. You have to have the knowledge to how to do it. Engineering was existent in this time.
The hundreds of people who made this would have had to have been based here for years and would have needed to be supplied with food. This may have been a move away from hunting and gathering and an early step towards farming.
It's interesting that this fantastic site of Göbekli Tepe, with its wonderful sculpture, appears almost at exactly the same time as agriculture develops and crops are domesticated.
The DNA of modern cultivated wheat is linked to this region.
You can still find patches of wild einkorn wheat, and einkorn was one of the main origins of modern wheat.
The great change from hunting and gathering to organized farming marks the birth of civilization, and it happened here, in an area known as the Fertile Crescent. According to the poetry of the Bible, when humans lost their innocence, they were cast out of paradise to farm the land. Göbekli Tepe, some have suggested, could have inspired the story of the Garden of Eden. Professor Philip is on his way back to Göbekli Tepe. He wants to see if there's anything unusual in the alignment of the stones.
So just looking at these plans, it's interesting that all of the central pillars in these enclosures appear to be facing in pretty much, or aligned along pretty much the same direction.
When the circles were built, they did not look as they do today. Before they were buried, these large central pillars would have stood proud at the very top of the hill.
What that seems to suggest is that they were all built that way because they were meant to face in that direction, and there was some underlying reason for laying them out like that. So as I've been going around, doing my own measurements, what I've found, it does suggest that these big slabs are aligned north-northwest.
The alignment of the stones is of great interest to Adrian Gilbert. He believes they could be directed towards the stars. But the view of the stars is not the one that would have been seen by the people of Göbekli Tepe 10,000 years ago. Back in London, Adrian Gilbert has a computer program that can work out what the view of the night sky would have been from various locations around the world for any given date in history. First, he inputs the location, then the date. He takes us back in time, back through the centuries.
What they would have seen on that point, rising on the horizon, if they were standing among the monuments here, amazingly, they would have seen the belt of Orion. These three bright stars which form the belt of this constellation called Orion.
The constellation of Orion is one of the most recognizable in the entire sky.
It's like a figure of a man, his head, his shoulders, with his two legs down here. He's reaching up, holding a club, and reaching out here to a staff, or sometimes it's represented as a shield or an animal pelt. It's very often Orion is regarded as being the figure of a hunter, a great hunter in the sky.
He believes it could be an important clue to the meaning of the site.
Well, the idea that the complex at Göbekli Tepe is connected with Orion is actually very exciting, because it's not the first time that we've come across this idea.
Although many disagree, Gilbert believes the three Egyptian Giza pyramids, 7,000 years younger than Göbekli Tepe, were built to match the three stars on Orion's belt. There are two bright stars, and one that is slightly less bright and offset from the diagonal. Gilbert believes the pyramids follow the same pattern.
There seems to be that these pyramids were used as a method for aiding the sending of the pharaoh's soul back to the stars. The idea is that they were building these pyramids as representing stars to help them send the souls of the pharaohs back to the stars of Orion's belt.
Gilbert wonders if there was a similar purpose at Göbekli Tepe.
This is exciting because it suggests that this idea of Orion being connected with the cult of the dead is much older than we thought it was.
Although Phillips and Schmidt may not agree with Gilbert's conclusion, back at Göbekli Tepe, there is evidence that the temple structure was associated with death.
Central motive, easily recognizable, being a vulture, with a vulture's beak, and he's playing or acting with some disc or some ball, and below them a very large scorpion, which is very well depicted, very naturalistic.
Vultures pick away at flesh, and the stone benches between the pillars may contain clues about the flesh they could feast on.
One of the most interesting features of these enclosures are the stone benches set in between the pillars. We have it also in other sites, and there we found inside such benches human bones being buried inside.
Göbekli Tepe appears to be a site of violence and bloody ritual. Back at the old city of Sanlufa, Professor Philip reviews the photographs he's taken at the site. Images that all seem connected to death.
Looking through the images really has brought home to me the connections, or the possible connections between birds, vultures and death. And this really does seem to be a line that's worth pursuing further.
This mysterious 11,000-year-old site is slowly giving up its dark secrets. Philip now visits Professor Schmidt to see if he shares his interpretations of the carvings.
So I was particularly struck and excited by this photograph here. Now, can you tell me a little more about this figure at the bottom of the image?
So we have a human torso, and we have the arms and the shoulders, but clearly no head.
Yeah.
The head is missing in this part. It's a very strong connection with the motive of death, without question.
He believes the vulture on the same stone may be playing with the decapitated head.
Maybe it's a head of the person.
Yeah.
It's not depicted like
So
this,
do you
but
think
it
it's
could be.
possible that there's a complete death association with this particular pillar?
It's not a peaceful scenario, it's a horrifying scenario.
That night, Schmidt takes Philip to Sanlufa's museum to show him an exhibition of artifacts from Göbekli Tepe.
With very big teeth, and even also ribs are shown.
Yes.
So we have maybe symbolizing death or illness.
The theme of death also appears on the next sculpture.
We can see here on top, we can see the ears.
Yeah.
So it's clear it was not a human head at the top, but an animal, most probably the head of a lion or a leopard again.
Yeah.
But with human-like arms, and the hands are holding something.
Schmidt believes the animal might be holding the remains of a human head.
Our idea is maybe the soul of the human had been brought by the animal to another sphere.
So the lion is holding the head of this human figure here. Yes.
But there is a third motive below. Here now the head is completely preserved. Fortunately, it's clearly a human, with arms. Maybe in a birth-giving position. It's not very clear, but if it was birth-giving, we have a very interesting combination of the two most important elements in human life,
Yes.
the birth and the death.
Professor Philip heads back to Göbekli Tepe for a final look.
This is my last few hours at Göbekli Tepe, and I'm sitting here in the dark in the middle of one of the enclosures, looking at the imagery with the wild animals and the death, the headless corpses, thinking about the possibility of there being bodies here. I'm now coming round to the view that these monuments are connected with death, perhaps some kind of death cult. I'm almost sitting in what you might describe as a village of the dead. And while bit by bit we're beginning to understand some aspects of Göbekli Tepe, it's clear that the site is still full of mysteries and may hold a large element of mystery for a long time to come.
Ancient peat bogs. And lying in shallow graves. Dead bodies. Victims, it appears, of bizarre and violent deaths. Deaths which took place over 2,000 years ago. The bodies, amazingly well preserved, provide a series of clues. They were no ordinary men. These were no ordinary killings. A prehistoric murder mystery. Early August 2011. Jason Phelan is cutting peat in an ancient bog just 100 kilometers from Dublin. He notices a strange shape emerge from the land. On taking a closer look, he comes face to face with a horrific, gnarled body. It appears to have suffered a brutal death and has been lying there a long time. So long, the authorities don't send in the police, but rather their top archaeologist, Ned Kelly. It's his job to figure out what the body is, where it came from, and how it ended up in the bog.
I was coming down the near field here, going around to the next, and I was about halfway down, and when I looked to the right-hand side, I saw what appeared to be almost like the back of a leather car seat sticking up, protruding from the bog. I stopped the machine, got out, and gave a little bit of a tug, at which point I saw two legs gently rising up out of the bog. The legs were actually quite intact. You could actually almost count 4, maybe to 5 toes on one of the feet, but parts of the body did appear to be damaged or gone.
Jason's peat harvester had dug up what is known as a bog body, the corpse of an ancient Iron Age man.
This man has come to us as an ambassador from the past, and we have a responsibility to try and tell his story.
But this is just the latest in a series of such bodies, all of them Iron Age, all of them mangled, all of them buried in peat bogs.
When we get it back up to...
Ned Kelly, keeper of Irish antiquities at the National Museum of Ireland, is like an archaeological Sherlock Holmes. For him, another bog body is a new set of clues in an ancient murder mystery. Jason's peat harvesting machine had caused some damage to the body. Within 48 hours, the strange, alien-looking corpse is removed from the bog and taken to a special laboratory in the heart of Dublin. Rowley Reid is chief conservator of the National Museum of Ireland. He has done an initial forensic analysis of the body and tells Ned what he's found.
This is where the buttocks are. Coming round, this line of the spine is here. This is the shoulder. And this is where the head was, the remains of the neck. Unfortunately, this side of the bog body has been hit by a peat harvesting machine, which explains why the head is missing and the actual body itself has been torn open.
It looks like the internal parts appear to be quite intact as well. We should be able to learn a great deal about this person.
I think excellent prospects for being able to find out about them.
Ned, like any good detective, wants to find similarities and patterns between the various so-called bog bodies to help decipher who they were and what happened to them. The gnarled, black corpses are men who died horrific deaths before being laid to rest in cold, windswept peat bogs. And it's thanks to the bog that the bodies are preserved so well. The acidic water and antibacterial moss in the peat work together to effectively embalm the corpse. The bog bodies have been frozen in time for over 2,000 years. And if he can correctly read the clues, these bodies can transport Ned into the strange, alien world of Iron Age man. Ned thinks 2 other bog bodies in particular may be able to help his investigation. Known to archaeologists as Cloney Cavern Man and Old Croggan Man. These bodies have been carbon dated to the Iron Age, around 300 BC. Rowley introduces Ned to Old Croggan Man, who also died violently.
The first injury we're supposing that he would have suffered is this stab wound to his upper chest.
Right.
And with this wound, there is also a corresponding defence wound just here. From the position of that, we know that when he was stabbed, he had his arm up like this to defend himself.
Right.
And the blade caught his arm as it entered his chest.
Now I noticed there are insertions of widdies. This is these twisted ropes made from branches.
Both of his upper arms have had a knife driven right through them. And then the withy has been placed inside that wound. It's been pushed right through. So you can see there's an entry wound.
What other injuries have we?
He's been decapitated. It was carried out by somebody who's quite experienced in these things, maybe a butcher. But whoever did this knew exactly what they were doing.
So, this man was stabbed in the chest, had his head cut off, and had twisted branches inserted through his arms. But something else was done to him. Something truly bizarre.
We've also got these very strange wounds to the nipples, where the nipple has been sort of squeezed perhaps and certainly and cut through from above, but not cut all the way through, just sort of partially severed.
Okay.
It's a very, very bizarre thing to do.
It looks as if they pinched them and sliced the back of them.
That would certainly be how it looks, yes.
Yeah.
Another bog body, Cloney Cavern Man, reveals similar violence. The nipples were slashed by a blade. Also, the head was smashed in.
There's a wound across the bridge of his nose, just catching one of his eyes there, which certainly would have felled him. Then there's another wound to the top of his head here. You see the skin has split, the underlying skull has shattered, and when he was in his unconserved state, it was actually possible to see his brains through the wound, and the overall effect of those, that his skull basically completely shattered.
Who were these men? Why were they killed in such a peculiar and brutal fashion? And why were they disposed of in a bog? Ned hopes that forensic analysis can help answer these questions. Samples from Cloney Cavern Man were sent to a team of forensic archaeologists in York to conduct tests. The scientists here are trained to spot things that might otherwise be overlooked. And doctors Stephen Buckley and Joanne Fletcher think they found something.
I saw this particular body, Cloney Cavern Man, first in Dublin. And what struck me most, I think, really, was the hair. It was shaved at the front around the forehead, and sort of like a sideways Mohican, really quite high on the head. how could that style be maintained?
The thing about Cloney Cavern Man's hairstyle that is so very intriguing is it's clearly vertical, but as I studied it with the microscope and the magnifying glass, I could find no means of identifying what was holding it in position. The elaborate hairstyles are created with plaiting, knots and so forth, but this simply wasn't anything in the case of Cloney Cavern Man. And the more I looked, the more frustrated I became that I couldn't identify how this style had been created.
Ned is on the hunt for background information that might help him. The first clue comes from the Roman writer, Tacitus. Tacitus was a senator and a leading historian of the Roman Empire.
Traitors and deserters are hanged on trees. The coward, the unwarlike, the man stained with abominable vices, is plunged into the mire of the morass.
It appears Tacitus was familiar with the practices of Iron Age tribes, including burying bodies in bogs. But the tribes Tacitus refers to weren't Irish, but from mainland Europe. To find out more, Ned makes a video call to Danish archaeologist Christian Fischer.
Christian, I found a reference in Tacitus to the casting into bogs of executed criminals. I'm wondering, is this interpretation by Tacitus to be trusted?
Tacitus, he's one of the explanations, and for many years I was convinced he was right. But today I would think there's perhaps is a more interesting explanation behind the death of the bog bodies. I must say I'm convinced today that they are not criminals.
Okay, so we're not dealing with a form of punishment. There's some other explanation at play.
When Tacitus are writing, it was at least 3 to 4 centuries after the most part of the bog bodies was put out in the bogs. So I think it's not really an explanation of what happened in the north part of Europe.
Tacitus didn't have first-hand knowledge of tribal practices. He was writing years after these events took place, and he himself had never traveled to Northern Europe. At Ned's request, Christian goes to check out one of the most intriguing bog bodies to have been found in Denmark, known as Tolland Man. While Christian goes to examine the Danish bog body, Ned receives a visit from Mick Macken, a top fingerprint expert of the Irish police, the Garda. He has taken prints from the fingers of old Croghan Man, the corpse with the severed head. The prints won't identify the body, but to Mick Macken, they might offer up some clues as to the lifestyle led by the deceased.
What I'm particularly interested in is what information we can get about this man and about his lifestyle from the examination of his hands.
Mm-hmm. I took these casts from Old Croghan Man. Look at the definition of the ridges, the actual finger ridge detail.
It's extraordinary.
It's absolutely incredible to think. I mean, that could have been taken off somebody who died 3 or 4 days ago.
Does the condition of these hands suggest perhaps that this man may have been a farmer or something like that?
Normally we find people engaged in heavy manual labour where they use their hands a lot, that the actual fingerprint ridges themselves they'd be worn from the heavy work. But we can see Old Croghan Man's is in very similar condition to my own one, as they're very, very distinct.
So it's certainly reasonable to assume on that basis that we're not dealing with an ordinary Iron Age farmer here.
It's probably not proof positive, but it certainly supports that.
So, the blackened corpse in the bog appears to have been someone of high standing, a member of the ruling class. Certainly not a petty criminal. The strange, violent death was unlikely to have been a punishment for some minor crime. Over in Denmark, Christian is going to check out Tolland Man. Discovered in 1950 in a remarkable state of preservation. Carbon dating shows this man is over 2,000 years old. He's been hanged.
fantastic to see his closed eyes and mouth.
His death occurred about 350 years before the time of Jesus. About the same time, the Irish bog bodies were buried.
Let me see the hanging rope. Around the neck, there's the hanging rope is still placed there, ending up in a noose. The face is extremely calm. And you can, if you go quite close to him, you can see every wrinkle. He is placed like a person in a sleeping position.
Christian emailed some digital photos to Ned for examination. Like the Irish bodies, Toland Man has suffered a violent death. But why? Was he a villain or a coward, as described by Tacitus? Or something else completely? Ned and Christian resumed their video call.
Here you can see that after they have hanged him, they must have placed him exactly like a sleeping person. The coroner tells me that the relatives must have closed his eyes, closed his mouth, after he was killed. That will say they more or less have liked him. He was not a criminal up to them. If he was a criminal, they would just have thrown him out.
Christian has a theory that the bog bodies reveal a ritualistic killing.
I'm convinced that Toland is a sacrifice to the gods, because one of the gods in the Norse mythology, Odin, sacrificed himself by hanging in a tree. Later on, people were sacrificed to Odin by hanging. And it's striking to me that many of the Danish bog bodies are hanged and have still the noose around their neck.
Ritual sacrifice is an intriguing idea. But the god Odin was not worshipped in Ireland. Ned needs something else, some other indication of who the man in the bog was and why he might have been killed. In York, the forensics team, Drs. Stephen Buckley and Joanne Fletcher, have analysed hair from Cloney Cavan Man and have come to an extraordinary conclusion.
These hairs are actually from close to the roots of Cloney Cavan Man. The sample that was taken showed something very, very interesting indeed. It pointed to plant oil, but much more significantly also in there was pine resin, one that pointed to, from the chemistry, pointed to the Mediterranean, southern France, northern Spain.
In the Iron Age, the use of luxury materials to adorn a person suggests Cloney Cavan Man must have been an extremely high-status individual.
The materials used as this ancient hairstyling product, these aren't native materials, these are imported materials and imported from quite a distance. So to have the status, the kudos, the wealth to be able to import such materials and then use them on a regular basis, on a daily basis, all of it adds up to giving us an individual who would have had some real clout in his society.
Cloney Cavan Man, it would appear, was a member of the ruling elite, a chieftain perhaps, or king. But if these bog bodies were, in their time, lords or kings, why were they buried where they were? Ned returns to where one of the bodies, Old Croghan Man, was found. He has with him a map showing the ancient tribal boundaries of Ireland.
This is a map that was made in 1563 when these lands were still in the control of the native Irish. So the divisions of territory that's shown on this map are ancient Irish divisions. And when I go back and look at this map, here, Tuatha Croghan, and then here we have Croghan Hill itself, and the bog body is found just here. Now Croghan Hill isn't just any old hill. This is the place where the kings of this area, the kings of Ufalia, were inaugurated. So this is a special territory, and the body is on the boundary of that territory.
Ned believes that the bog itself was a boundary, a place between this world and the next.
A bog consists as much of water as it does of land. It's a very unusual landscape. It's a route into the underworld as well. And during the Iron Age, all the land surrounding this bog would have been covered with thick oak forest. When they go out on the bog, they're suddenly open to the sky. This great vista on the sky above and the underworld, the land below, this strange land which is partly land and partly water. It makes perfect sense that an unusual and strange landscape such as this would have been the perfect place to conduct important rituals. And there's no ritual more important in early Iron Age Ireland than the ritual of human sacrifice.
What were the Iron Age men hoping to achieve by a ritualistic killing of their kings? Mary Cahill, a colleague of Ned's at the National Museum of Ireland, is an expert in prehistoric Ireland.
This goes back to a complex belief system which involved a cult of the sun and how that relates to fertility, and particularly in this case to male fertility. In the Iron Age, the king does represent both the fertility of the people and the fertility of the land.
Mary has made a study of ancient body armour and jewellery discovered in Ireland. Many of these artefacts echo prehistoric man's focus on the breast and nipple as a symbol of power and fertility.
They are modelled on the male body, and there's a very particular emphasis on the breast area, culminating, if you like, in a little boss that represents the nipple at the very centre of the breast area.
It may well be that the mutilation of the nipples of the sacrificed bog bodies was a brutal way of symbolising the end of their kingship.
My conclusion was that we see just how important this whole fertility cult is in the Iron Age, and undoubtedly it has its roots going back, at the very least, probably a couple of millennia.
Next morning, at daybreak, Ned sets off for Croghan Hill. Mary's thoughts have made him more convinced than ever that the two bog bodies were ancient Irish kings.
We're standing on top of a burial mound on the summit of Croghan Hill, and this is where the kings of this area stood when they were inaugurated as king. When a king stood here in the Iron Age to be inaugurated as king, it's my belief that his predecessor was killed ritually and buried in the bog at the base of the hill.
The price of kingship was a violent ritual death. The dead lord became part of the land, a kind of human payment to the gods.
The inauguration of an Irish king involved a wedding of the king to the goddess of sovereignty, and the goddess of sovereignty was the land itself. When the king was killed ritually, he was offered up as an offering to the goddess.
Ned believes he has now solved the mystery of the Irish bog body killings.
Just looking at these remains, one can't help but wonder, are these hands that held a child or caressed a lover, or perhaps wielding a sword and leading his men into battle? For I believe that Old Croghan Man was one of the ancient Irish kings, and that he was sacrificed for the betterment of his people.